RPYA, how are you? Yes, I see a lot of shadowy faces. This is going to be a good night, but I'm shadowed with you. This is my first time out of the house in 5 days. Crazy. I got home Tuesday evening at 10 p.m., feverish and shaky, and I slept 20 hours on Wednesday, and here I am. And so, I was supposed to teach our main services this weekend, and Michael, yearly early pastor, he's like, hey, we can swap our weekends in the discipleship series, and it's like, no problem, and then he got sick. So there it is. God is good. Hey, we are kicking off a new series here at RPYA called, is it up? Boom. A lot of excitement about that. A lot of excitement. Or is it more like nervous energy? You're like, wait, who did I sit next to? What is going on? Yes. So yeah, for the next few weeks, we're going to be tackling these topics. It'll be myself and Dre Carillas. We've got some amazing young gun teachers, but we thought it might be more wise to have some of the older dogs who actually know what they're talking about talk about some of this stuff. No disrespect to our younger teachers. They're good. You can teach concepts, but Christy, where you at? I'm not teaching concepts. I'm teaching facts. And there she is right there. So October 19th, 1999, we shut down the coffee shop Vinaka in Carlsbad, California, because we were just getting to know each other, and it was really cool. And then in May 17th, 2002, we said I do. So that means this May, someone do the math. How many years? 23? Yeah, 23 years that we've been married. Yeah, it's at the start, I thought, lucky lady. And then you realize you're a piece of work once you get married, and you're grateful that God gives you a partner to help you grow. So now I'm like, thank you for the journey thus far. We have 2 daughters. You may know one of them. She comes here regularly. She's currently in the partnership course. So there's a whole bunch of people learning to be like, hey, who we are as a church, and she's doing that. And then we have another daughter in high school. And so I'm a girl dad, and it's awesome. I love it. And then I'm like, and now I want to protect you from everyone wearing a hat like this whenever I see. I'm like, no, back up, boy. You gotta step up to something strong if you want to walk with these ladies, because these ladies are chasing Jesus. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm just rambling. I may still be sick. I don't know. But it'll be good. There's some message notes. Did you guys get those, by the way, on your way? If you need them, or if you... Kristen Graham's got some in the back that'll help you follow along. But hey, I'm excited to kick this thing off tonight. The purpose of the series is to just really dial in and understand how do we do this well, right? How do we chase after what God intended and make sure we're honoring him in the pursuit of something, and figure out God, I want to do it your way, right? It's interesting. You look at our world has all sorts of definitions on words like love and relationship and things like that. And it's just a hot mess. And that's not what God intended. And so we're going to dive in to see what he wants for that. Now, if you're here and you're visiting and you're like, hey, I don't even know if I'm Christian, but a friend brought me or whatever, we're going to be unpacking God's design. And so the word design has heavy intonation. It means intention, right? And so by definition of that concept, we're assuming that there's a God who created us for purpose, intention, and a way to do life. Now, that's not going to fly well with culture. Culture's not going to like that, because we like to define ourselves as we are. And so I want to give you your trigger warning, because I think your generation is supposed to get those. As we look at this, there might be things that you find offensive. And I just want to be upfront with you. My goal is to not offend you. My goal is to be faithful so that you understand what God wants. Right? And so if you are offended, we can process that, but the goal is just to say, God, we want to understand who you are and who we are so we get it right. And so my assumption is there's a right way, and it's his way. And so one of the things is that as you're thinking of this future possibility of you with the first word here, married, how do you prepare for that now? Right? So you can begin the journey of getting ready long before the ceremony comes. And so that's some of what this series is about, is to help you do that. And some of you might be like, hey, I don't know if I'm ever going to get married. Married might not be in my future. And that's cool because here's what you want to understand about that. You can still honor God's design and how you live out your singleness. And you can still support God's design in the community in which you're living in and walking with. And you just may never know. So I have, she's passed now, my grandmother's sister, my great aunt, Auntie Marie was her name. She died at 100-ish. My whole life of knowing her, she was a widow. So she was widowed at like 40-ish. And then I came into the family scene. So she was just always Annie. She was like the fun Annie, like energy. I'm like, whatever is in her genetic line, I'm like, I hope that was strong when it came into our side of the family tree. And then I remember like the Christmas of her 80th year, she brought Walt to family Christmas. 80 years old, and she's hooking up. Like 80 years old, and she brought a date to family Christmas. And she's robbing the cradle because I think he was like 78. And we're like, Annie Ree, like, it's been like 40-something years. She found love again at 80 because as she lived out her life, even those widowed single years, she was still honoring God's design, God's intention, so that when it was time, she got to have a second run at love. And then she outlived him by 10 years, right? Like, so yeah, she died at 100. You can do the math, right? She got married at 80, outlived him by 10. There's a whiteboard. We can do it afterwards. But like all that to say, like even if you're like, love sucks and you're broody and moody, or you're like, this isn't ever going to be for me, like never rule out what God can do in your story if you're faithful to what he has for you in his intention and design. And so we're going to jump in and start unpacking this. And so one of the things I want to do is just, like, we're going to talk through two simple principles that flow out of when we understand what God's design is that help us understand what marriage is meant to be. And so you go to the beginning story in Genesis. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 is just beautiful. It's rich. You see that God was moving with intention when he created us and brought us into this world. And Genesis 1 is just kind of the overview of him bringing the world and everything into existence. And every day, good, 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 good. And then he creates us as a race. And it's like, it's very good. And then you read the beautiful things that God was doing. Like Genesis 2 is a more robust picture of what he's doing specifically with us as a race and forming the man from the dust of the earth. And he breathes the breath of life and says that that's when Adam became a living being, right? So that's what makes us unique from the animals, is that we have the breath of God. God's design is in us. That's why we're more than just instinctive creatures. We have instincts, but we can actually pause and think about it. Like, here's how you know that you have more than just instinct. Have you ever thought about what you were going to do and then decided to do it or decided not to do it? Yeah, animals can't do that. Animals just react, right? So, like, I love to scare Christy. It's something we've had to work on in our relationship because I'm a younger brother in my family of origin. She's an older sibling, so she doesn't like that. And so there's times where I jump out like, ha! And then she freaks out and pauses, and then her eyes change, and then she hits me. And I'm like, that wasn't instinct. That was revenge, right? Like, so, but this is something that, right? But you look at, I don't know, that's not in my notes. You look at what God was doing, and it's so beautiful, because one of the things it tells us in making us binary beings, male and female, created in his image. So women, you're an image bearer of God. Men, you're an image bearer of God. So it's not a physical thing. It's something unique in who we are, but we're binary because that's how he designed us. It says that they were naked and knew no shame. Do you understand the weight of those words? Like, just imagine if you're hanging out with like your best friend and suddenly you're both naked. You'd be like, awkward, right? Like this is weird, right? Like, no. But it's more than just the physical nakedness that's being described here. It's this intimacy of connection that they had. Like, there was nothing between them. They knew each other. They were fully known by one another. And like have you ever had someone that you're just really close with? You still don't fully know them because there's still something that's hidden in who we are. And yet you see, like, God, this is what God intended. God wanted this kind of a relationship to be intimate in the most beautiful and complete of ways. That was his design. That's what he wanted. Like, it was all good, right? And so then, Genesis 3 goes bad because our first parents do the one thing God said not to do. They believe the deceiver. And in that moment, everything breaks, right? So what's the first thing they do on the other side of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? They cover themselves. Like they literally start hiding from one another in a physical way, and then deceptions and lies begin, and you see the breakdown of God's design for humanity in general, but this relationship in particular, go forward from that moment. One generation, their kids are killing each other. Like, I mean, this is how dark it gets and how fast it gets. And then you just read, it spirals, and you see oppression and all the stuff that happens, like everything that's broken now. And so it's no wonder we're now trying to figure out, God, how do we do this as people who have messed up and broken what you had created? And so I think all of us, if we were just like going to sit down and be honest, we could say like, hey, this thing called marriage, we probably have some mixed feelings about it, depending on even our family of origin, right? So like my wife, Christy, she's from a divorced family. There's so much pain there. I'm from an intact family. It doesn't mean they're healthy, right? Like I'm like, God, thank you. Mom and dad stay together. But man, that's a weird relationship I look at sometimes, right? And so I think all of us could say like, hey, there's still pain as we're trying to figure this out. The reason Taylor Swift is so popular over so many decades is because of how screwed up we've made this. Stop and think about it. Like every song she has is just a heartache of a broken relationship that went wrong. It's just a matter of time. I think now that Kansas City Chiefs lost, she's dumping that guy in this year at some point. She's like, you're a loser. I'm going to write a song and make another $1 million, right? I'm not being prophetic. I'm just saying that's kind of her MO. I was going to read one of her song lyrics, but you guys were probably 6 years old when it came out, so you probably don't even know it. But like you look at like that's just like we're just messed up and we're broken and we've made a mistake. And so here's what we oftentimes do when we look at the mess we've made: we throw God's design under the bus, right? So we say like there must be something wrong, God, with the institution, instead of saying maybe the problem is us. Right? Like maybe we need to own our part and seek to come back under your rulership and your authority and walk out your design with greater integrity. Like I think that's where, if we're just going to get honest, because it's really easy to blame God. God's like, guys, it's not me, it's you. Like if you ever want God to be honest with you and say, God, what's the problem? He'll tell you. He'll say, let's go to the mirror and let's work on it. And here's the beautiful thing: God wants to work on you. God wants to take the mess and redeem it and restore it. And so even though we've made a mess of things, if we're willing to come under his leadership and let him lead us, there's hope that we can have healthier and better than how the world lives it out, or even how some of you have experienced from your own families of origin and stuff like that. And so brokenness doesn't have to define you if you're giving yourself to God and asking him to lead you and guide you into what he wants for that. And so as we kind of like, okay, God, here's your design. Then let's talk through a couple things. And I want to look at this first point here, that marriage, what is marriage? Marriage is a lifelong commitment. So hopefully not rocket science. I think we could all understand, oh, this is what it was supposed to be. And I want us to look at something Jesus says here. I haven't used my voice in like 72 hours, so here we go. So Jesus is asked this question by some of the religious leaders in his day, the Pharisees. And so they have a question about divorce. And so they ask him this question, Matthew 19, 3-6. It'll be up on the screens if you want to follow along. So some Pharisees came to test him. So they're not actually caring about their answers. They're trying to like get him in trouble. But Jesus is like, you want to play ball, let's play ball. And so they asked him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? You know, we have that in our culture today. You know what we call that? No-fault divorce. Like that's a fairly new thing in the last generation or so, meaning like, hey, we can just dissolve the marriage and no one has to like pay money if we are in agreement, right? Like it's crazy. Like we're not creating up new dysfunction. This was already going on 2,000 years ago. And so they're like, hey, can a dude do this? Is that lawful? And I love how Jesus' response. He goes, haven't you read? He replied. So catch this. He's taking them to the source, to the text. Because if you want to know the answer to this question, then let's go back and see what God intended for us. He replied, haven't you read that at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female. So he's quoting from Genesis 1:27. This is fascinating. Jesus talking about the fact that we're gendered beings, he doesn't need to reference this to answer the question, but somehow he wants us to understand this is actually important if you want to know God's design. And so the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And now he's quoting Genesis chapter 2. So Jesus goes back to the original story, the design. Here's what God said. This is what he intended. And he's referencing Genesis 1 and 2 to say this is what it was supposed to be. This is how it's meant to be. And he's helping us understand that what God's design is that marriage is a lifelong commitment. Which is why, like, you gotta take it seriously. If you're gonna stand at an altar face to face with someone, like, don't do it in Vegas because you're drunk, right? Like, you got to be like, no, I'm trying to understand what I'm signing up for because I'm making a commitment to you. And we say these beautiful, I do weddings all the time, and there's all these beautiful words, and there's tears, and it's like, I'll let you play Xbox in their vow. I mean, you put that in your vows? Like, how stupid is that? Like, it might not even be Xbox in 20 years, and then you're stuck with Xbox. Like, pick a better option. But like they say, but some of the vows are like, in sickness and health, right? And the words for better or for worse. And I'm like, do you really understand what you're committing to? Like, do you really believe that? Because if so, then if the other person's committed and you're committed, you're going to get yourself through the for worse if you're both willing to fight for each other in those moments, not with each other, right? But this is the point of what Jesus is saying. Like, this is, I think, and so here's what I want you to understand. Marriage is a lifelong commitment. How many of you hope that marriage is in your future? I mean, we can make it awkward. If you would like to raise your hand. If you're right next to him too, you could be like, right, but yeah. Right, so let's assume for the sake of awkward argument that you're like, yeah, like I want that. So here's what I want to tell you. That commitment starts right now. It starts right now. I'm not saying to whomever they are, because that would just be weird. You're like, I'm just going to go and get married under the moon and hope they're looking at the moon and we're, like, that's not what I mean, right? Or like you've been out on a couple dates and you're like, well, I guess it's us. Like, no, again, that's not what I mean. If he asks you to marry him on the first date, no, I'm sorry, if he says, God told me, ladies, here's the response to the God told me we're supposed to get married. You're like, cool, when he tells me, I'll let you know. That's free for showing up tonight. But here's what I mean. The commitment to God's design starts now. Like, God, I'm committed to what you want for this thing called marriage and how I choose to live out my life running towards that day, whenever it is, even if it's not till I'm Annie Ree and I'm 80 years old. But I'm committed to that. And that commitment begins now, which means how I treat other people that I'm in relationship with. I don't treat them like my spouse because I'm committed to the relationship I'm in, which is with you and your design first. And so that means some of you might have to do some serious wrestling with your sexual ethic and how you live that out in light of what God's design and intention is. And so here's the implications of it. If you're involved with someone who you're not married to them, you're potentially taking what belongs to someone else. Or you're giving away what belongs to a spouse you haven't met yet. And so you got to say, God, I'm committed to your design first. And see, the more that you live within God's design now, hear me, the less baggage you bring into that relationship someday. Now, I'm not saying this in a shameful way because none of us are perfect. We all have issues and baggage. And God has mercy, and there's redemption and forgiveness, and repentance is how we begin to shed that baggage, right? But I'm telling you now, you can prevent a lot of pain then by how you choose to live up until then in the life that you're walking through. My older sister when she got married, we moved her out of our family's home to her new home. And there's a bit of a hoarding issue in my family. We used to think it was my mom. Now we realize it's my dad. And we realized for sure it was my sister. And so I remember we're moving her from our home of origin into her new house. And so my brother-in-law, he has like a truck and another car. Because we're like, how much stuff could she have? Oh my gosh. We were just pulling boxes out, like she was a magician pulling like rabbits out of a hat. We're like, where is all this coming from? And she's like, well, I have a hope chest and I have chocolates from my first, we're just like, this is ridiculous. And I remember my brother-in-law is just like, what is going on? And I was just like, dude, I pulled him aside and I gave him a Sharpie and I'm like, if you put a code on some of these boxes, we can make sure they never make it. But she doesn't have to know. But he said no because he was trying to be a good husband. The marriage obviously didn't work. But like there was so much baggage, like literal baggage she was bringing in this relationship. And that's like metaphor of sometimes if we're not willing to do the work of what God is doing our stories, we're bringing stuff with us into that relationship. So that's why here at Rocky Peak, if you grow up more and you want to get married, we invite you to take this thing called Symbis, called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. And so one of the purposes of Symbis is to help you discover your baggage together so that you realize, oh, you're messed up? And they look at you and go, you're messed up? But you're going into it together with eyes wide open so that you're not surprising one another with what's in the boxes, but you can say, okay, now how are we going to work on this together? So the goal is to not be baggage-less. You're a fallen person. You already have baggage. The goal is to be baggage-aware. And so that you don't let the baggage break down and hurt the relationship, but that you can work on it together. And you can begin to say, like, okay, like there's some friends we have getting married at some point, and he was calling because they had discovered some stuff about each other in Symbis. And he was processing with me. He's just like, I don't know. And I said, that's a decision you're going to have to make. In light of what you've discovered, is this somebody you can walk with and help each other heal towards something better? And the beautiful thing is he, with eyes wide open, continued to say yes to that so that together they could grow into something beautiful, right? But you can minimize the baggage by walking in your commitment to God's design today. And so let me think about how to protect your commitment to God's design. These aren't things in your notes, but I'm going to use build some fences in your life by guarding some things. So the first thing I would just tell you got to learn to do, guard your body. Be wise about how much of yourself you give away to someone physically, and the places you put yourself in, where it's easy to just be like, hey, right? Don't play Taylor Swift's Home Alone. It'll be a bad love story, right? But you got to put some fences up and some boundaries around that, which means you might say hey, we're never going to be home alone. That's the price you pay to protect yourself, so that you're honoring God's design, so that one day if this is the one, you can be home alone and be like, woohoo, at that point, right? But you got to guard your body. You guys understand what I mean when I say that? Because I could diagram it, but I don't know. Other thing, you got to guard your heart. There's this beautiful Song of Solomon, and it's one of the older women speaking to the younger woman. She's like, do not awaken love before it's time. It's just this beautiful wisdom, right? And so raising two daughters, I remember when they were little and watching all the Disney movies and stuff and having all the little Disney dolls, and there's one Prince Charming and all the Disney princesses, and I was like, that boy's a player. But I would watch them play and I would just see how much they were in love with love. Right? Even as just young girls. And so it's just hey, that's beautiful that you're desiring that, but let's make sure that you're preparing yourself for when you're old enough and mature enough to actually walk with someone like that. And so some of it is you might be like, hey, they're cute, I'm not ready. That's wisdom. That's wisdom, right? And to say hey, I really like you, you like me, let's be friends and just walk out our maturity a little bit more before we give ourselves to each other and we've opened our hearts to a relationship that we weren't ready for. Some of you know that, you were dating at 12 or whatever, right? And you have a broken heart because you awaken love before it's time. So you can guard your heart for that. I remember I had a girlfriend and 20 years old. I was a late bloomer. That was my first girlfriend. We dated 6 months, and then God was just convicting me on some things that were very unhealthy in that relationship. And I just remember I need to end this relationship. And then I said, God, I think I got to work on me. I'm going to guard my heart. So God, I'm going to give you a year. I'm just going to give you a year of maturing and guarding my heart. And God laughed, and he's like, I'm going to take 5, little man. And it's great, because then I was ready to meet Christy. It took a while. But there's times you may need to guard your heart. Here's another thing to guard. The third thing, if you're going to talk about building some fences, you got to guard your friendships. Oh my gosh. How annoying is it when you're hanging out with a group of friends and then they get together and they disappear? And you're like, I thought we were all hanging out. Where'd you go? And you're like, we just wanted to be us. And you're like, you can be us with other people, right? But this is why you need to guard your friendships. Your friendships will protect you. They'll hold you accountable, and they will see things you can't see. Some of you need your friends to look into your relationship and call you out. Some of you need your friends to look into your relationship and protect your butt from them, right? Because there's some stupid thems out there. I'm not just looking at the boys. I'm it's both sides of the equation, right? But your friendships will help protect you from the dangers of them. Something I always say too, if you are getting close to someone, you like them, and they don't have any friends, that's a dangerous person. I don't know, there's just if they don't have any friends, it's why can't they even have a friend? You just want to be careful about that. Right? And that's where your friends can be look out, right? So guard your friendships. Yeah. And if you can't do a relationship in the context of community, that's stupid. Be able to hang out with other people and invite them into that. It protects your relationship and it protects your friendships. Okay. Free stuff for showing up. Okay. That's the first point, as we understand God's design, is that marriage is a lifelong commitment. Here's the next thing to understand about God's design, is that marriage is a spiritual partnership. So again, you go back to the beginning story, and God takes the woman from the side of the man, and he makes a helper, is the language there, helper form. It doesn't mean a servant. It means somebody to do life side by side as you tackle things, right? And so it's like the healthiest of marriages is this partnership of two people coming together. There's a leadership framework that God has created, but men, if you're going to really be the leader in a relationship, it's a leadership of serving her needs. If you're leading from I'm the boss applesauce, ladies come and talk to us, we'll talk to him. Or we'll take him out to the woodshed and say, don't be stupid. But it's it's about serving, right? So yes, there's a leadership aspect, but it's a leadership of leading the way and following Jesus. It's a leadership of saying, I will take responsibility for the decisions as I seek Jesus, and I will serve your needs, and I won't be selfish, right? So that's the intention of that. But man, it's a partnership. And you got to make sure then if you're going to move towards marriage, you're partnering yourself with somebody who's on the same spiritual journey as you. Because if not, you're opening up a world of hurt. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 6:14, this simple phrase, and it can apply to a lot of things, but very much it applies to this idea of marriage. He says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. So you understand, yoked is a farm tool. Two animals would have a yoke put around their neck so that they could plow the field and multiply their strength. Jesus uses the same analogy in Matthew 11 where he's like, hey, come to me all who are weary and I'll give you strength. Take my yoke upon you and learn from. He's inviting us to partner with him as we do life so that he can help us do the things we can't. So as Paul's like, hey, don't yoke yourself with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? And so that might mean you have to pass on somebody who you really like because they don't belong to Jesus. And that's heavy and that's hard. But let me tell you what you give up when you Don't do this. Let me tell you what you give up when you just settle for anyone that you like that isn't chasing Jesus. You give up something so much. You give up shared spiritual beliefs and values. It'd be like marrying someone and you don't speak the same language and you never learn to speak each other's language. Well, you can figure it out, but that's just going to be weird, right? Is Jesus the most important person to you? This is what you communicate to somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus. He's not that important to me. I choose you. So why would they think he's that great? Here's something, this book, atheist guy named Hemant Mehta, he wrote this, again, probably when you were little. But it's a funny book. This guy, he sold his soul on eBay to any Christian that would buy him and take him to churches. And so he just writes about his experience of visiting churches. So it's kind of a fascinating read. An atheist goes to church kind of a thing. But in the middle of this book, he talks about, as he's projecting into the future, hey, wait a minute, what happens if I, as an atheist, marry one of these religious people? And so listen to what he says. He goes, when I thought about having children in the future, religion suddenly loomed as an issue that could have a major impact. If I were dating a religious person and we got serious about each other, would I consider raising our future children in her religion? No, I wouldn't. There are some religious ideas I wouldn't mind my children learning and others I am against. If it meant a lot to my wife to get our children baptized, fine. To me, baptism is just water. Wow. Like that's not what we believe baptism is. Baptism is us saying, Jesus, I give my life to you and I'm going to follow you. He goes, but if our children were required to attend catechism classes and learn what I consider to be irrelevant rituals, I would oppose such practices being taught to them. Like other interreligious couples, we would need to work out certain compromises. Let me tell you, one of the greatest joys I have as a father is seeing my daughters chase after Jesus. And knowing that I have a partner, that's the same value, and that when life is hard or whatever, that we're both going to the same source on behalf of our girls and inviting our girls to chase after the same person. It would kill me. Hey, Christy, Indy wants to get baptized. No. Why not? I don't want your religion corrupting our daughter. That would crush me, because the greatest thing I could hope for them is that they would know him. Right? And yet so often we don't look down the road. We just settle for the right now. But they're cute. But I like them. They've got a good family, right? Instead of saying, but do they love Jesus? Do they pursue him? See, this is what you gain when you commit to this. When you understand this idea of spiritual partnership. We got this triangle coming up. There it is. If you have this relationship going on where you're committed to your relationship with God and they're committed to their relationship with God, you now have a trifecta of power going on in that relationship. So I just just look at this concept here. There's you, there's them, and there's God. So naturally, look at this picture. What happens as you grow closer to God and they grow closer to God? What naturally happens to the two of you? You naturally grow closer together, right? There's something beautiful and powerful about that. As you just, so there's been times in mine and Christy's relationship over the years where her faith has been stronger than mine in certain situations. And I've needed her to help hold me and tether me to God. So one of those times was before we came to Rocky Peak, way back when, before 2007, we were living in the Bay Area. We had a really rough go. We had a miscarriage with second child, and I was really wrestling with my faith. And I was like, God, if you're so good, why? Why? I don't know if you've ever just asked the why question, and you've wrestled with the pain in your story. And and I was afraid of how dark it was getting for me. And I was grateful that I could just look at her and say, can I just hold your hand right now? Because I need to hold on to you as we hold on to him. And that's the beautiful thing that you gain in those relationships, is that you help each other grow. You help each other chase after him. And see, there's such value in finding the right person. You can write this down, Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. beautiful piece of wisdom here. It's not specifically talking about marriage, but oh my gosh, it applies beautifully to marriage. But it's the idea like two are better than one. They have a good return for their effort. All these beautiful things that Solomon's writing here. And at the very end, he goes, a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And it's this beautiful idea, this image of like two people doing life together as God is also a part of that relationship. And it's like this is going to be a relationship that's going to stand the test. Like you're going to do marriage someday with someone, and it's going to be the greatest adventure of your life and some of the toughest things you're ever going to figure out, because you're a piece of work and they're a piece of work. And here's your hope. If you're pursuing him together, you're his piece of work. And he's at work in that relationship, helping you get through it. You know, and somebody invariably always asks, I don't know if you guys call it this is what we called it in my day, missionary dating. Like, what about missionary dating? I would love them to Jesus, right? Like, I don't know, you might get lucky. But here's what I would just say. Don't settle for a good person. Settle for God's person. Like, pursue the one that's pursuing him. And so this brings to a question as we think about this. If this is God's design, that's a lifelong commitment. It's a spiritual partnership. Simple question. Do you know who you are looking for? I don't mean you have a picture of them. I just mean, do you know the kind of person you're looking for? My friend Frank, when I lived in San Diego years ago, and he was a hunter. I remember one time he'd gone out hunting with friends, and he came back and he was just telling me a story. I'm like, so what'd you guys hunt? And he's like, we're just out shooting stuff. I'm like, wait, what? Like, we see birds, we shoot them. We see like a deer, we try and shoot. I'm like, don't you need like a license for that or whatever? Like, some of you date like Frank hunts. Honestly. Just like, if they're cute and they're breathing, hello, right? Like, oh my gosh. Like you need to date with purpose. And you understand there's a purpose to dating. And it's not so that you're not alone on a Friday night or on a Valentine's Day. Well, you know, here's the purpose of dating. To discover the kind of person you want to marry. And so if you're dating someone, you realize, I don't want to marry them, I just don't want to be alone. Stop it. Do not waste their time. They deserve better than to be your holding pattern. And men, can I just talk to you for a minute? That's how boys pursue girls. What's the cutest girl on the playground, and can I catch her? Men pursue girls or women because they want to find a partner, and they want somebody who will make them stronger. And so if you're just chasing the field because you're a player, like, I'm going to pray that Jesus crushes your Riz and protects her, right? Like, because she deserves better than a boy acting childish, right? Like, and so like men, like this is me saying some of you need to grow up in who Jesus is in your life and start standing tall in that. And then from that place, say, God, I want to find the right one in that sort of a way. And so let me give you a suggestion as you're trying to say, do you know who you're looking for? When I was given the grow up talk, I realized I needed to get serious about what this looked like. And so in that 5 years of God taking singleness to grow me up, I came up with a list of 5 things I was looking for. I'm not saying 5 is the magic number, but for me, it just became a very helpful framework for what I was pursuing. And these are my things. I'm not saying these need to be your things, but I do recommend the first thing as everyone who's a follower of Jesus thing. And so here's the first thing on my list. I do not want to marry someone who is just a Christian. Like, I wanted to find somebody whose pursuit of Jesus was so strong, it inspired me in my pursuit of Jesus. Somebody that I looked at and I would be like, I got to keep up with her. Like, she's running the race. thank you. Now I got to giddy up. Like I wanted somebody who was chasing Jesus so strong that it was inspiring to me in my story. Second thing that I was looking for, somebody who wanted to be a parent. Like, because I had a desire to be a dad, right? And not everyone has that desire, and that's okay, or not everyone will be able to because of just, we're in a broken world. Like, stuff doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. But there are some people who actually don't want that, and you don't want to partner yourself with somebody who doesn't want what you want, right? And so I just knew very much, and so, like, that was a desire. This one's less important now because I'm old. But back then, like somebody who like wanted to do outdoorsy stuff because I thought I was really cool when I was healthier and younger. Like I used to go to Yosemite every year with my family. We would climb Half Dome. It was just like the greatest. And so, but I was like, yeah, somebody that can do that. The fourth thing for me, somebody who could live a simple life. Because I knew I was going into ministry as my calling and that our family would be dependent upon a church providing for us as we were spiritual leaders in that community, right? And I knew I wasn't writing the book that was going to make $1 million. So it's like, hey, we got to be able to live a simple life. Like she didn't need, like if she wanted all the things, I'd be like, I don't think I'm the guy who can give you all the things, right? So can you live that simple life? And then the fifth one, and this feels lame to say, but she would love me for who I am. Meaning like as I am, like not that she didn't want me to grow or become a better version of who I could be as I chase Jesus, but like meaning like I'm a nerd, like I like Marvel and I like elves and hobbits, like all that stuff. That she would be like, that's cool, like, all that stuff. Right. And so when I moved from LA down to San Diego at the end of 1999, a good friend that I knew, I'd moved down to like live with him and work with him. He knew Christy, he knew me, and he's like, Joel, you got to meet this girl. I was like, talk to me. And he's like, her name is Christy. She's in ministry at the church that I was moving down to. She's awesome. She loves Jesus, So he was just painting this great picture. And I remember when I met Christy, I was obviously attracted to her. Notice that that's not one of the things on my list. That's implied. Obviously, you're going to find your attraction to the person. So to me, that was a given. So when I met her, I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying. But as we got to know each other in the fall of 1999, I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's like this is who I've been looking for. And it made it very easy to pursue her with purpose. So that like on our second date, I was able to say, hey, I don't know where this relationship is going, but my intention is to pursue you to see if this is where it's going. And I'm not going to mess around pursuing anyone else because I want to pursue you. And it was cool. She was like, yeah, ditto, right? It's probably more profound what you said than that. But that was like the idea, right? Because I had made commitments to God's design in my own story. I was getting myself ready to understand what that looked like. I knew who I was looking for so that when it was time for God to bring us into each other's space, like we were able to discover fairly quickly, I think we're the ones who were meant to do this life together, right? Now, I'm not saying there's the one, that's a stupid idea. There's the one. Here's how I know Christy's the one. We said, I do. We said, I do. That's how I know she's the one, right? Prior to that moment, we could have said, I don't know if this is going to work and moved on. But from that moment on, she's the one, right? And the reason I made that commitment. So here's how you know if you're ready to make that commitment. Are you becoming the kind of person you would want to marry? And I don't mean that in a narcissistic way. Like, don't wake up tomorrow and be like, hey. I mean that in just a very simple way. Like, so often we're consumed with them or finding them that we're not working on us so that you're ready for when you meet them Or you're saying, God, I want to work on me in this side of the equation and become the kind of person who is. And so, like, I just want to encourage you, like, someday, if God brings you to a point of a wedding and how we do it in our culture is there, you're going to spend so much time and energy and money on a ceremony. And I'm amazed at how much we spend on those and how little people actually spend on preparing themselves for what happens the day after that ceremony. Right? And so you can begin preparing for that now and how you're choosing to walk this out. And one of the ways is to say, okay, here's the kind of person I'm looking for. Am I somebody who can handle that kind of relationship? Am I somebody that they would want to tether their life to as we walk through it together? And so here we are kicking off this series. I just want you to understand that God has a beautiful design. Are you willing to commit to that design today? And are you willing to hold out for the right spiritual partner so that you can do life with the kind of relationship he intended you to have? And so as we wrap up this one, I want to pray for you. Let me kind of put, as Michael, our lead pastor, says, and I'm old enough I can do it too, let me put my dad hat on. And just pray. I want to pray a blessing for you and a challenge over you for what God would have for you. And so, Father, as we look at what you intended for us as a race, oh God, such a beautiful thing that you created and you designed. And God, thank you so much that when we just blew it all away in Genesis 3, you didn't give up on us, but you've pursued us to redeem us and restore us as we turn to you. And so God, would we repent from the broken ways of this world and turn to you so we can experience the life you're intending for us? And when it comes to this idea of marriage, would we commit now? And so God, I want to pray specifically for the young ladies in this room. God, that they would have a deep sense of their identity in being your daughters of the King. That they could stand tall in who you've created them to be, ready to run beside their partner when that time comes. But God, until that time comes, would they know that they are fully complete in you, and they'd find their identity in you, and they wouldn't be waiting to start the race. They'd be telling the boys, catch up. And God, I want to pray for the young men in this room. And I would just ask that you would awaken within them a deep desire to grow up in you so that they would know how to pursue your daughters in ways that are honoring to the women in this room, that they could rewrite the narrative of our broken culture, that we could paint a picture of something better, that God, ultimately, in the union that you're desiring, it's a picture of what you want with your church. And so as men, could we pursue it in a way that's honoring to you, that shows a picture of who you are and your goodness? And so would you help us grow up as men into that reality so that we would walk well with you? And so until that day, would you grace them with patience? Would you grace them with a passion to pursue you? Would you bring healthy friendships along the way so they could cheer each other on and be champions of what you're doing in one another's story? And God, someday, would they stand face to face with the one you are designing them to be in relationship with, confident that you've prepared them for that moment as they've chased you from this day forward. In your name, amen.